I want us to look at a simple tool that you can use in your home to help promote some independence and make your life a little bit easier. I want us to look at timers. Timers are something that I use all day long with my kids. Sometimes I have so many timers going off, I don't know what's going on. But timers are a great way to eliminate conflict and teach my kids to be independent. There's two ways I really like to use timers. I like to use them with transitions, and I like to use them for task completion. So I want to start by talking about how I would use a timer with transitions, and then we'll move into the other. Now, when we think about transitions, a lot of times we think about movement from one location to another. But I don't want you to just think of it like that. I want you to also think about when you're moving from one activity to the next. So maybe you're doing homework with your child and you're moving from your math homework to your reading homework, or maybe you're cooking dinner and you're moving from cleaning the kitchen to mopping the floors. Whatever it is that you're doing, you don't have to be changing locations. It's not necessarily, hey, it's time for us to leave and go to the grocery store, or it's time for us to leave and go to practice. It can be a simple transition within the same room. Now let's talk about how to use a timer when you're in a specific transition. The very first thing that you need to do is make sure that you gain your child's attention. I think the best example for this is thinking about your child that's engaged in a super preferred activity. So that might be a video game, or it might be a card game, or I've got one that it's when she's reading a book. I could say anything in there and my kids would not hear me. So you want to make sure that you say their name and get their attention. They need to be looking at you. You need to make sure that they are focused on you. The next thing that you want to do is you want to tell them how long you're setting the timer for and what your expectation is when the timer goes off. So I might say, hey, I'm setting a timer for 10 minutes, and when the timer goes off, I need you to go unload the dishwasher. Or, hey, I'm setting a timer for 5 minutes. When the timer goes off, you need to get in the shower and get ready for bed. So tell them how long the timer will be set for and what the expectation is when the timer goes off. Next, either you need to set a timer or have your child set the timer. I like having my kids set the timer because I know then, okay, they're definitely paying attention. They know when the timer starts. We use all sorts of timers at our house. I'll use them on my watch. I'll use them on Alexa. I will use them on the phone. I've used just kitchen timers before. I mean, there's no endless supply of timers anywhere, probably in anyone's home. So it doesn't matter what type of timer you use, just make sure that your kids know what the timer is. When the timer sounds, it's still important that you monitor your child's behavior. Now, I'm saying monitor because I really don't want you to step in immediately. The great thing about a timer is that it's going to promote independence. So if I can just sit there and watch and see, okay, what is my child doing? It lets me see, okay, are they being successful with the timer? Are they ignoring the timer? If they're ignoring it, then I'm going to step in. But initially, I'm going to sit back, I'm going to monitor them and see if they're doing what they're supposed to do. If they don't, I might come in with a friendly reminder, but I'm not going to just come in and just totally take over, because then I shouldn't even use the timer. I've really kind of defeated the purpose. Now, some people will ask me, hey, you're saying to use timers, but my child doesn't understand time. Our little kids, even kids at first, second grade, they don't totally understand that concept of time, and that's totally okay. The thing with the timer is it's going to provide that auditory cue for your child that a change is coming, that there's something different they're supposed to be doing. So whether or not they totally understand time is not a huge concern for me, because really what I want them to do is I want them to listen for that cue and know that that's signaling a change. If this is the first time you've used timers in your home, it's going to be really important that you pair it with some reinforcement. Then again, if you've watched my videos before, I always talk about reinforcement. Reinforcement is going to increase the likelihood of that behavior in the future. So if I want to increase that behavior, I want to make sure that I'm reinforcing it. And reinforcement is different for every kid. I might have one child that prefers this for a reinforcement and another one that this is a reinforcer. So I have to know my kid and know what is going to reinforce them. But if they do transition off that, we know when the timer goes off, if they transition and do what I'm asking them to do, in the beginning, I'm going to want to reinforce that. So I want to definitely reinforce it with words like, hey, I like the way you got off the timer. I like the way that you listened, but I might even need to add in an extra reinforcer to increase the likelihood that they continue to do that. You don't always want to be doing that. You don't want to be doing that in 2 years, but you want to do that in the beginning, because when you find a system that you're going to use, you have to spend some time teaching that system and reinforcing that system if you want it to stick. So if you've never used a timer before, look for something simple that you can start with. That might be transitioning off of a preferred activity, or just making a change from, hey, we're doing math activity to reading activity. Start super simple with that to kind of learn that system and then build from there. The next way that we can use timers is for task completion. And when you're thinking about that, I don't want you to just think about academics or school. I want you to think about anything in your house. So this might be cleaning up. It might even be sitting at the dinner table. It might be the amount of time that your child spends in their room playing alone, like for an afternoon break time or nap time, whatever it is. But I want you to think about using a timer to help your child know when that time is up. Now again, your child doesn't have to understand time for this to work. You're really just using that for that auditory cue. Your older kids, they're gonna understand that it's for time, but for your younger kids, it's still beneficial to use, and you're laying that foundation that you can build upon as they start to understand time. Timers are a super effective way to keep your child engaged in a task. One task that my kids struggle with at our house is cleaning out their closets. Their closets are like these collect-alls of anything that mom says to put away. Let's throw it in the closet, and then I open the closet door one day and it's just like vomiting. And if I'm like, hey, go clean out your closet, everyone feels overwhelmed. But what I can do is I can set the timer and say, hey, I want you to clean your closet for 10 minutes. And that seems doable. That seems like something that everybody can achieve. So they clean their closet for 10 minutes and we're done. The next day, hey, we're gonna clean our closets again for 10 more minutes. Set the timer and everyone does it again. By the end of the week, I've got the same goal met that I wanted. Everyone's closets are clean. They look great. We'll start over in a few months when it gets a mess again. But there was no arguing and completing that task that I asked them to do. So if you want to use a timer for task completion, the first thing you need to do is you need to choose an activity. What is the activity that you want your child to do? Next, rather than having your child work towards some type of goal that's not based on time, maybe it's something tangible or actually completing a whole page of something or cleaning out the entire garage, you're just going to pick your time limit. I would start small. You don't want to push to frustration in the beginning. Start smaller than you think you need to start. It's also helpful to establish a criteria for working. What do you consider working? You don't want your child to just race the clock and do nothing and sit there and be like, oh, the timer went off, I'm all done. Make sure you know you've set that expectation. Hey, while the timer is going, this is what I expect you to be doing. You're going to pick a timer that you're going to use and you're going to start the timer, or you're going to let your child start the timer. Then while the timer is going and when you hear it sound, you're going to monitor your child. Remember, we're not trying to nag. We're not trying to cause an argument. The point of the timer is to eliminate part of that argument, to help that with that smooth transition. So monitor your child, step in when needed and provide some prompts to them, but try not to nag, try not to argue. If your child does what they're supposed to when the timer sounds, if they have done the work in the way that you told them you expected them to do it, and they stopped when the timer went off, you want to make sure, again, that you're pairing reinforcement with it. You want to give them verbal praise. You want to tell them exactly what it is they did that you liked and provide some type of reinforcement to increase the likelihood that that behavior is going to happen again. So let's look at a few examples for this one that might kind of help. Let's say that your child comes home from school, they've got an entire math page their teacher sent home that has to be done by the next day, and your child hates math. Not only do they hate math, but it's the end of the day and they've already done math once today. So how can we use a timer to help us make this a little bit less conflict, a little bit less stressful? What I would do is I would find a place to work and I would say, okay, hey, you know what? We've got this whole page to do, but we're going to work for 10 minutes. And if you work for 10 minutes, you can get up and then you can go outside and play with your friends. So I've set the expectation. I have a place to work. We set the timer. If your child is actively working for 10 minutes, as soon as that timer goes off, hey, go play with your friends. You can come back in later and y'all can do another 10 minutes and you can eventually get through that entire page. But you're making it to where you've set the expectation, it seems achievable, and your child is working towards whatever it is that you've set for them. Okay, so we've talked about how to use a timer for transitions. We've talked about how to use a timer for task completion. And some of you are thinking, I'm certain I've used timers before and they don't work for my kid. So let's talk about that for a second. What do you do if a timer hasn't worked for your child in the past, or you just don't feel like it's going to work for your child? Here's the first thing I would do. Use a variety of timers. See if you can find a timer that motivates your child. So I've talked about Alexa, I've talked about my watch, I've talked about kitchen timers, but you can also use, a little sand timer, or you might have those little timers that have like the little lava that goes, it looks like lava that goes through it, it's like water and oil or whatever that you flip upside down, and once everything settles, it doesn't have to be a traditional timer. Try something that doesn't really feel like a timer to your child and see if they respond a little bit better to that. You can also consider putting the timer out of sight. Some kids, especially if you have a child that might be a little bit more anxious, when they see the timer and they can actually watch those numbers ticking down, that stresses them out. If that is your child, it is not beneficial to put a timer right in front of their face while you're trying to get them to do something. So if you need to set the timer, tell the child, hey, the timer's going to be in here, go ahead and do that. There's no rule saying, hey, the timer's got to be right in front of their face the entire time. If that auditory cue, that loud noise, just startling your child bothers them, you can find lots of different ways around that. You can find timers that will just like kind of vibrate like your phone when you have it on silent. You can find visual timers that either show a whole picture kind of that appears as it goes, or it has like a red little area that shows. You could use those types of timers for your child. That way they're not startled by that auditory cue or if it's too loud for them. So there's a good option for that. Another thing you can do is introduce a timer in like a more positive framework. So maybe use a timer when you're playing games with your kid. Like my kids when they were little used to love for me to time them running like the little circle in our house through the kitchen and the living room and the dining room. And so maybe use a timer that way. Be like, hey, I want you to run. Or when you're at the park, hey, let's time how fast you can run to that tree and back. So that you've kind of paired more of a positive relationship with a timer rather than the timer always being something of like, oh, I have to stop doing this, or oh, I've got to get this done. If none of those work for you at all, use something else for a timer. Hey, you need to listen to 2 songs of whatever it is before you can stop. Or, you know, we have 1 TV show and then we have to do this. So you don't have to use an actual timer that's keeping time. You can use activities as your timer, but it needs to be activities that your kid has a frame of reference for and that they know that they can see, okay, this is ending. There needs to be an end point. Okay, so let's talk about some benefits from timers. 1, timers help with making your transition smooth. I don't have to come in and cause conflict with my kids because I'm sitting here nagging about stuff, or hey, I'm telling them to put their stuff away. The timer really gets to be the one that's making that call. Hey, the timer went off, so it's time to do XYZ. You also can get your kids to complete more tasks without all the drama. Hey, we're going to break this down to where it feels achievable, and you're going to do it for X amount of time, and then you're going to be done. And we get to move on to something that's more enjoyable. It's also the beginning. It's one of the building blocks for independence. Think about as adults how much of our day is timed. Like we don't have necessarily timers, but we're using schedules. I'm like, okay, I'm going to work on responding to all these emails for X amount of time, and I've got to go to this meeting for X amount of time. We do the same thing. We are starting to build those lifelong skills with our kids of time management. And the timer is a great way to start with that. So as you're looking around your house this week, see if you can find some ways that you can use timers to help you with transitions or with task completion. And see if you notice how it eliminates a little bit of conflict and helps keep your kids a little bit more engaged. If you found this video helpful, go ahead and like it, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you know when more content is out there on how to make your parenting less stressful.